This is the Five Lights Podcast. Yes, and welcome to episode 8 of the Five Lights Podcast. I'm your host Daniel Herrick, and race 3 of the 2015 championship is in the books. The Chinese Grand Prix has finished, and Lewis Hamilton has won yet again. Mercedes are back on top in Shanghai. We've got lots to break down. We're not going to go through any news like we do on a usual podcast, because all the news is in the race. So without any further ado, let's get going. And that again is our intro music from bensound.com, your one-stop shop for your music multimedia needs. So head over to bensound.com and download some tracks now. So I don't use this podcast on my own, as you know. I have my brother, my compadre, my friend. I would never ask him to be quiet over Team Radio. Ben, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, good. It's
just don't talk to me during news segments.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good race, not as action-packed and thrilling as Malaysia, but an interesting race because some interesting relationships and interesting infighting has already started to form on race 3.
Yeah, so as you said, not as good as Malaysia. I think the safety car helped that race, but a lot better than Melbourne still, and enjoyable. I would agree that a lot of people probably think it's boring because there wasn't an overtake every 5 seconds, but yeah, a lot of strategy played out and a lot of off the track stuff happened as well, but we'll get to that later on.
Indeed we will, and every race can't be perfect, every race can't be like Malaysia, and if you read the post, shameless plug here, if you read the post that I wrote about why we love F1, you'll know why every race can't be perfect. But anyway, let's get into this race, race 3, Chinese Grand Prix. A good weekend overall for Mercedes. Ferrari were slightly out of touch. We're just going to give you a sort of 30-second breakdown of what happened in the race. So, obviously, 2 Mercedes locked out the front row in qualifying with Ferrari behind. Hamilton pointing his car towards Rosberg at the start. Got a good start, got ahead of Rosberg and got clear. There was a bit of chaos in behind, a little bit of contact. Carlos Sainz spinning on lap 3. And then throughout the race, it was just who can catch Lewis Hamilton. And there was a little bit of tyre wear issues. And Rosberg was a little bit feisty on the radio, saying that Lewis Hamilton needed to speed up at some points. It looked like at one point that Vettel was going to catch Rosberg, and Raikkonen maybe even joining the party as well. It wasn't to be. There was a few incidents later on in the race with Button colliding with Maldonado, and we'll get into Maldonado's race because that really was a Jekyll and Hyde race, a race of 2 halves. And we lost one of the Red Bulls in Danny Kvyat through an engine failure, which is going to give him engine penalty points as well, so it's not looking good for Renault and Red Bull. And then right at the end we lost Max Verstappen in the Toro Rosso to an engine failure as well, and that sounded horrific. And then we had the safety car came out and the race finished under a safety car. So that was the race really, with Lewis Hamilton winning and Rosberg finishing second with Vettel just in behind. A good race, Ben, though, yeah?
Yeah, really good race. I didn't think it played out how people expected. I think people were building up that Ferrari were going to challenge him, but Mercedes had a lot in the bag and were pretty much uncatchable this weekend. But a lot of, as I said before, a lot of squabbles between the top drivers, especially the Mercedes pair. Indeed,
and you sort of cited in some bold predictions before the race that you thought that Vettel and Raikkonen might be the ones who were doing the in-squabbling. But even before the race started, Hamilton was a little bit upset with what Ferrari were doing, leaving the pits.
Yeah, when drivers go out to line up on the grid just before they set off for the race, a lot of drivers do practice starts on the pit lane exit. And I think there was both Ferraris and a few other cars all lined up waiting to do a start. Hamilton decided, because I think he'd already been round once, he decided he didn't want to do a practice start anymore, he just wanted to go out. And as he left and got out of the pit lane, Vettel decided to do his start, and they were very close to each other, and Hamilton came over the radio and said, it's a bit naughty from Vettel, I nearly hit him.
Yeah, a bit of gamesmanship there, trying to get into the head maybe of Hamilton, or was it just an honest mistake? Maybe he didn't honestly see him, or who knows? I mean, only Vettel really knows what happened for sure, but Hamilton wasn't happy about it, and that sort of riled him up for the race. And then another point to make before we start going in depth into the race: 20 cars on the grid bench, a full race grid.
Finally, yeah. Not how it finished, but it was good for it to start with all 20 cars. And yeah, it's really good to see that, especially the Mauritius, that they managed to start, because a lot of people were rumouring beforehand and before the weekend that Mauritius couldn't run at the same time, and I don't know how they figured that out. It was to do with the amount of people that they had. They can only work on one car at a time, but they put that theory to bed, and yeah, they were lined up, and they qualified within 107% as well, so they had the right to race.
Yeah, and so they're getting there. They're getting there. I mean, obviously the flyaway races are difficult to get any sort of production done, really, and any sort of development done because you're so far away from the garage. Excuse me. So it's good to see that they're within the 107% already, and they can only get better as we go towards Europe. Obviously, got one more flyaway race before we go towards Spain. So yeah, it's looking good for Marussia. And then, so let's get into our in-depth sort of analysis then of the race, Benj. And it started right at the start with some gamesmanship from Hamilton and how he angled his car in his pit box facing towards Rosberg almost, as if to stare him out to make sure he could beat him into the first corner.
Yeah, I panicked a bit. Obviously, if you've listened to the podcast from the beginning, you know I'm a huge Lewis Hamilton fan. He parked his car, as you say, at quite an angle. I mean, we'd seen drivers do it before, but this was something else. This was really tight, and he was facing pretty much the wall right in front of Rosberg. And I was querying to my family, do we think this is legal? Is he going to get punished for this? But after the race, when they interviewed Hamilton, it was actually his own mistake. He did his burnouts to get some grip into the tyres and some heat into the tyres, and he found himself staring at the wall. So he kind of had to stay with it. You can't, once you stopped on the format, you can't do anything else. You can't reverse. You can't do anything. You've just got to, deal with it. But he managed to get a good start anyway.
Do you think that's true, though? Do you think that's not him just covering off the fact that he was really aiming his car towards Rosberg to see him off into that first corner to get the inside line? Or do you think that's a genuine thing? Because actually, when you look at it on board, I mean, they showed, obviously, the footage from outside looking into the grid. It looks a really drastic and dramatic angle. But actually, when you ride on board with Hamilton, it didn't look as dramatic. So do you think he was genuinely because of a burnout issue, or do you reckon it was just what he wanted to see Rosberg off in the first corner? Because he got a really good start as well and was really ahead of Rosberg anyway, so he didn't really need to do that.
Yeah, he is renowned for his good starts, and I do think he meant to angle towards Rosberg, but maybe not that much, because the way turn one works is it's kind of three turns, because it's turn one that goes into turn two, it goes into turn three, and there's no straight in between. It all winds. It's a really long corner. So to get track position, you need to be on the inside for the whole of that complex. So Hamilton did need to point in front of Rosberg, but maybe not to that degree. I mean, I don't know. As you said, off board, that looked, like he was pointing 45 degrees off his mark, but on board it didn't look as much.
No, it didn't look as much at all, but he got a good start. He got away ahead of Rosberg, and it looked like he was flying at the start. And Rosberg got away cleanly as well into second place. And there was a little bit of sort of commotion behind it. It all looked very, very tight. The Williams were fighting with the Ferraris. The Ferraris were getting in there as well. We had Vettel and Raikkonen coming out on top, but then Massa got ahead of Bottas, and then we had that contact as well, didn't we? We had some contact between, it was Kvyat and Verstappen, with Kvyat hitting Verstappen in the end. So the Red Bulls and the Toro Rossos, that battle continues on into race 3, and they're getting in the walls now.
Yeah, it was very tight. I mean, especially that long corner, it's not just a car on the inside, it's a car on your outside, and I think at some point we even saw cars 4 abreast on the opening lap. We did see the contact from Kvyat with Verstappen. I think he tried to stay on the track rather than go on to the runoff, which, fair play to him trying to stay on the track. I mean, it could have been a lot worse than it was, but he caught it quite well as well, because it suddenly just slapped out of control, and he managed to catch it well. But talking of good starts that Hamilton had, someone who had an awful start was Daniel Ricciardo in the Red Bull, who he kicked into anti-stall, and I think he started 7th, if I look at my notes. I believe he did. Yeah, he started 7th, and I think he fell to 17th by the end of the first lap.
Yeah, he had an awful start, and Daniel Kvyat had an awful start as well. I think I wrote down by the end of lap 1 that it was Kvyat who was in 13th and Ricciardo was in 16th place. That's just a terrible start.
Yeah, and then we saw Kimi being Kimi, and that was good to see. He managed to storm past both Williams on the first lap, so that was good. And that meant he could then challenge the top three, so the Mercedes and his teammate Vettel. So I got pretty excited about that because I wanted to see Kimi of old, the 2007 world champion.
Yeah, it was good to see him back, and Ferrari looked strong again at the start, keeping in touch with the Mercedes. And then we got on to lap 2, and Carlos Sainz had a little bit of an adventure outside of turn 1, didn't he? And apparently he wasn't to blame.
No, apparently it's like Hamilton did in Malaysia in the last race. Sainz came on the radio and said afterwards, "Don't speak to me in the corners." So I can understand it from the driver's point of view because, especially that corner, it's a long, tight hander. You've got to focus on the cars. And you're trying to keep that line. And all of a sudden, I don't know how loud the radio is in the helmet of the driver. So I don't know if it's just a subtle volume or it's all of a sudden it's just a boom, someone talking to you. And that obviously can just put you off. And, he only has to move his foot a few more millimeters, I suppose, and he's lost control as he did and went bye-bye. But I did like the onboard shot of the Force India. I think was looking out the side of the car, and you see him going round, and all of a sudden he just spins out of control like a ballerina.
See you later. Just disappeared completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a few sort of... I'm going to write a blog post later on about the sensitivity of Formula 1, and this is one of the things I'm going to mention, is team radio. And I saw a hilarious tweet from Badger GP who said that obviously drivers don't like being talked to through the corner, so Monaco should be a quiet Grand Prix.
Should be very quiet, yes.
Yeah, indeed. So that washed him out and it put him back a little bit, which is a bit of a shame because he was looking strong as well through qualifying, and I expected big things from him this weekend. But he got back on the grid, he was fine. And then I wrote that obviously position 14 to 17 early in the race was Red Bull, McLaren. Two previous titans of Formula 1 fighting it out for 14th place, and how the mighty have fallen. And I also wrote at this point, because Kvyat was really struggling, is Kvyat perhaps out of his depth at Red Bull?
It seems that way to begin with. We saw how well Ricciardo did last year, but that was a reasonably good Red Bull. And obviously we know the problems that Red Bull are having so far this season with the Renault power unit. They both struggled, Kvyat more so, and he does seem a bit lost, if that's the right word. We saw today in the race that Kvyat and Ricciardo were on different strategies. Kvyat ahead of Ricciardo, and Ricciardo needed to get past and was getting held up by his teammate Kvyat. And they came on the radio, the engineers, and said, let him go, you're on different strategies. And Kvyat kind of put up an awkward and rather silly fight, really. He was all over the place, and I think Ricciardo at one stage was going to go and overtake him in the first corner, and then Kvyat closed the door on him all of a sudden. And
yeah, that was on lap 6, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's very, very erratic driving, and he's quite an aggressive driver and quite scrappy. I haven't seen him really be that clean. He's kind of all fight, and then that kind of puts him off. He needs to go. It's going to sound silly, but he needs to drive slower to go faster in the race.
He needs to be a lot smoother, doesn't he? He can be a bit aggressive and a bit over keen. And the move he pulled on lap 6, to say it was going into turn 1, he looked like he'd given Ricciardo room, and then it almost looked as if he took off the nose of Ricciardo as he was going around that first corner, and it was a silly fight, and it cost them both time and places in the end, because the McLarens were right there baying down the neck of both of them, and they could have capitalised on that. And I actually wrote later on in my notes, that the camera angle shooting up towards the pit lane is brilliant, and it adds so much drama. Because it looks like they're just turning into each other and they're going to hit each other. But yeah, Kvyat with a very dangerous move there, and I'm pretty sure he'll be getting a stern talk to in the post-race briefing there about his attitude towards the race. Because we like to see teammates, like we do at Mercedes, we like to see teammates racing each other. Excuse me, what is wrong with me today? But there's a time and a place to do it, and there's a way to do it as well, because he didn't look in control of the car.
No,
so,
I think Ricciardo said after the race as well that they're gonna, as they always do, we'll wait until our briefing and then we'll say more then. But he felt at the time that he should have been, or got past a lot quicker than he did.
Yeah, indeed.
So a little hint that Kvyat should have yielded.
Indeed. So we go on to lap 10, and we lose the first car, and it is unfortunately a Force India of Nico Hulkenberg who retires due to a loss of gears. And he's actually said over the radio, lost the gearbox, something bad happened, heard a big bang. So that's not good, and that probably explains why he left the car pretty sharpish.
Yeah, I mean, we heard, I don't know if you watched the race on Sky Sports F1, Martin Brundle, his grid walk, spoke to Bernie Ecclestone, and he made a comment a few days ago about commentators like Martin Brundle were, explaining things in such a complicated way, and it wasn't simple enough. But Hulkenberg, he seemed to do a fine job of it. It went big bang, and it doesn't sound very good. I mean, that's simple enough for me. That's what I need to know.
Yeah, we know something's gone wrong if you're hearing a big bang, especially if it's coming from behind you. You want to get out of that car fairly quick, because there's a lot of things that can go bang in a big way in a Formula 1 car.
But it took a while to clear it as well for the marshals.
Yeah, I want to get onto the marshals at the end, because obviously, if you've seen the race, you'll know
both.
Yeah, the calamity at the end was hilarious. But overall, the marshals were fairly slow today, getting that car off the track. Because yes, it's not in a particularly dangerous place, but you don't want to see cars left on the side of the track, because if someone has an accident there or similarly wants to pull off, you can't just leave cars strewn around like a car park.
No.
And then 2 laps later, Ricciardo's coming over the radio complaining about his first set of tyres, and that's just when we see the sort of first set of stops as well. And tyres were a big story this weekend. He was on the option tyre saying that they were going bad, and his engineer tells him that the primes, they're not looking too much better either. So it was a real gamble on which tyres to take at which time, wasn't it, today?
Yeah, we saw Nazir pit the first on lap 11. I think the window was between about 11 and 15 we saw in the end. But I think every car bar Kvyat, and I think there was only a couple others, only a small handful, were on the medium. So I don't think Ferrari and Mercedes and other teams could really take the comment from Ricciardo's engineer at face value, because they said the mediums aren't looking very good at the moment, but it was only really his teammate that was on that compound. So Ferrari think, well, okay, that's just your car. Our car can do a lot better, and we saw that in practice. So I don't think they really acknowledged that comment. And as we saw, Vettel came in on lap 13. He came in first, and I think they bolted on the softs, which I think is they were either going to do soft, medium, or soft, medium, soft. And I think because of the track temperature, they decided to put on the softs first and get the most out of them, and then run longer at the end of the race. And then Mercedes then had to cover that, and they put on the softs as well when Lewis and Rosberg came in at 14 and 15 respectively.
Because it was uncharacteristically warm today, wasn't it? And that was the thing that maybe caught a few of the teams out. Obviously, towards the end of the race, the track's rubbered in anyway, but the temperatures were cooling off, so the tyres were going to come in a little bit more and be a little bit more successful. However, right at the start of the race, it was very, very hot. And usually we're used to seeing in China it being cool with that horrible smog that covers the track, or wet. So obviously that caught a few teams out today.
Yeah, I think they actually managed to see some blue sky over the weekend in China, which is unusual. I think Martin Brundle said they've been there since 2004, and that's the first time he's seen blue sky.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That proves how much of how smoggy it is in China. But yeah, that was the big debate coming into the weekend: is tyres. How are Mercedes going to do with their strategy, and how will they work on their tyres? But they did a good job of managing that, to be honest, and covering Ferrari. I think after the first pit stop, the top 3 remained unchanged. So no one got an advantage there. So it was kind of, that was it. See how you get on from now, and then it was the next part of the race was the next set of pit stops, which came later.
Indeed, on lap 14, going from one Red Bull team to their sister team Toro Rosso, where we had the Kvyat and Ricciardo fight, Verstappen asking his engineer, to remove Sainz from his way. Get out of my way, he was saying, because they were obviously on different strategies, like the two Red Bulls were. But it's good to see that Verstappen's, he's 17. Teenagers obviously have an attitude. We've all been there. We've all been teenagers. Ben is still a teenager, but it's good to see that he's not afraid to. I mean, he's obviously a fantastic driver and a fantastic fighter, and gets amongst it, and he's not scared of anybody. But it's good to see that he's not scared to get his teammate out of the way, because really he is doing the better out of the two at the minute.
Yeah, I'm going to Badger GP in our predictions and teams. I had the choice between Verstappen and Sainz, and I have to go with Verstappen because he just seems more complete. He's younger and got less experience, but he doesn't seem to be making the mistakes that Sainz is, and he just seems very controlled and very precise, and everything's meditated, and he knows exactly what he's doing. But I didn't hear that radio comment, because I know that you listen to the pit radio, don't you?
I do indeed.
While watching the race. So was it a Kimi Räikkönen-esque kind of comment that how he made it, or was it just, oh, can you move out of the way, please?
No, I mean. I say to everyone, if you have Sky Sports and you've got the Sky Sports F1 channel, listen to the radio channel, because you get a lot more of the chatter over there than you do that comes across on the TV. And I've got a few other ones that came through that didn't come through on the TV as well later on in my notes. But he was just sort of saying, "I'm quicker than him. He needs to get out of the way." It was in that sort of tone as well. He goes, "I'm quicker than Sainz. He needs to get out of the way." His engineer acknowledged that, and then the engineer got into Sainz and said, "Verstappen is quicker than you. We're on different strategies. Let him go." And then Sainz, unlike Kvyat, did just that and let him go. But I just thought it was interesting to bring that up, because from a 17-year-old, you might sort of. Obviously, he's very successful and he's got where he is because he is good. But you might sort of see a little timid side of a 17-year-old, a bit afraid to ask. But he wasn't, and he was in the right to do so. And it wasn't as if he wasn't afraid. He couldn't fight him, because he was fighting him all the time. He just needed that little bit extra help to get him past. And it was just something that stood out to me there. And I think that's well played by Verstappen.
Yeah, see, I was very sceptical about him when it was first announced that he was going to be a driver, because he was younger than me and quite a bit, and I'm still quite young, I believe, anyway, or I feel it. But he's really good, and obviously his dad was a Formula 1 driver, and he's grown up in a Formula 1 paddock, so it makes sense that he's pretty good, because he's always been there and he's grown up in that environment. But it's quite a funny human behaviour. We see, 17-year-olds going to be in Formula 1, he's useless, he's going to be rubbish, he won't be able to do it, it's, Formula 1's awful. And now he's doing really well, and people are like, "Oh, we love him. He's great. He's going to be a world champion in a few years' time." And the FIA have now changed the super license. Well, they did it in the winter. They changed the super license rules, so you now have to be 18. And people say, "Oh, that's stupid. That's ridiculous." It's just a change comes about. People hate change. They criticise it, and they don't give it time. And then once they do give it time, it turns out it wasn't actually too bad. So yeah, I'm actually quite a big fan of Verstappen, and credit to him. And I agree with Brundle that given the right car, he will be a world champion by the age of 20, which is my age.
Yeah, it's sort of a what have you done for me lately with that sort of thing. A lot of people they want things a certain way, and then they see that it works a different way. But that's something for another podcast anyway. But Verstappen did really well today. And then on lap 16, Kvyat was on fire. I'm on fire, I'm on fire, I'm on fire, I'm on fire.
Not the good kind,
and not the good kind of fire, as his race ended a big plume of smoke.
Yeah, it's going from bad to worse for Red Bull and Renault. And then when Kvyat retired, they showed a clip of Horner on the pit wall, and he was shaking his head and distressed. And what's worrying is Ricciardo and Kvyat have used 2 engines each so far in the first 3 races, and they get 4 for the entire season. So they've already used 50% in the first 3 of 19 races now. So they're going to take a penalty, or probably quite a few penalties, in the latter part of the season. And it was interesting to see after the race, Cyril the Beatball of Renault sat on a bench, and he had Helmut Marko to his left, and he had Christian Horner to his right, and he must have been getting a right grilling.
Well, it looked like they were having a bit of a jovial conversation and a laugh, but I think there was obviously a little bit of tinted anger.
You couldn't see Cyril's face, so you didn't know if he was laughing. Helmut Marko and Horner were laughing, but I don't think a Beatball was laughing.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked uncomfortable, and they did sort of flank him either side, as if to say, "You're not going anywhere, pal."
Yeah,
we're having a little bit of a conversation here. But yeah, disappointed for Kvyat, but he does seem a little bit out of his depth in the top teams at Red Bull, and he's obviously getting beaten left, right, and centre by Ricciardo, but also the two guys in the Toro Rosso as well.
Yeah, they've. This is the thing that confuses me about this whole Renault engine debate is. Renault have made poor. They have made a poor power unit. There's no denying that, but it's not just the power unit that's the problem. But Red Bull seems to be struggling more than Toro Rosso. They've got the same engine, and Red Bull are the four times world champions. So why is it Toro Rosso are doing a lot better? And the reason that is because Toro Rosso are working with Renault. Franz Tost knows how to run a team efficiently. He knows how to work as a team and get things done. And they're not squabbling, they're not complaining, they're not children, essentially. They're acting Max Verstappen's age.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Whereas Christian Horner and as Dietrich Mateschitz came out in the week and said, if we're not winning, we're going to leave, which doesn't make sense. And in the build-up on Sky Sports F1 to the race, there was a piece with Keanu Reeves at Red Bull. And Adrian Newey said, you can't win everything. I was thinking, so why are you having the squabble with Renault? Why? Yeah. And I'm throwing my fists in the air because it just makes me angry.
It's a ridiculous argument to have, and it's going to rumble on and rumble on. But effectively, they just need to just get on with it, really. And if you go over to another shameless plug for something I've written, if you go over to the website at fivelightspodcast.com, you can read who I think actually is the best team in F1, and it sort of relates to that story as well. But we'll move on now to lap 19, and Rosberg getting sensitive as well over the radio, asking for a reduction in comms. It's sort of a spate of reduction in comms over the radio at the minute. Drivers not being not happy to be spoken to, even though in the last race in Malaysia, Rosberg was asking for more comms. So which way do you want it?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to that human behaviour. In Singapore last year, there was a new regulations that engineers couldn't tell their drivers certain things, and Rosberg, I think, was hit hardest by that because we keep seeing him asking questions. What does this mean for me? Even though he's in the race and he's racing the car, he seems to want to know what's going on and what he's doing. I mean, he even said in free practice, why did I lock up? I mean, you're driving the car. Why are you asking him when you did it? But as you said, in the race, he was querying, don't talk to me. Which way do you want it? I mean, maybe they should just ban radio communication altogether, unless it's like pit or you've got a problem. It's
ridiculous. Stupid. It's ridiculous. I mean, obviously, I can understand not being spoken to through certain sections of a track, the complicated sections in certain corners, because obviously you do need 100% concentration when driving these bits. But there's two massively long straights in China, which obviously you could talk to. If someone's in an overtaking battle, probably again not the best time to talk to them. And the engineers on the pit wall have a map of where the cars are, so they know where the cars are on the circuit. So I think sometimes it's a bit prima donna-ish, and it's easy to blame someone else if something's not going right for you.
Yeah, but maybe it's also the engineers as well. I mean, when Rosberg made that complaint, his engineer was telling him, Hamilton's 2 seconds down the road. Well, okay, that's very precise and pretty, but Rosberg, any other driver could see how far away he is, and Rosberg would have seen that it's roughly 2 seconds. So does he really need to tell him that? Probably not.
Yeah, and he did
but
say...
as you say, there's two long straights to tell him on and tell him a story or whatever.
Yeah, and he did say that on his comeback to the comms on the engineer, didn't he? Say, well, look, I need a reduction in comms. I can see where Hamilton is. I know there's a car behind me. I know where I am in the race. So thanks, but no thanks at this time. But come back to me later.
Yeah.
And speaking of later, lap 20, I've got 3 notes for lap 20. Lap 20 was a very busy lap, and this is where it all started to sort of fall apart a little bit more for Rosberg. Ferrari were closing the gap, and there was an inkling that Mercedes might start to be managing their tyres because they weren't very good on this set. Ferrari, as they were closing in, and Rosberg especially was starting to get a little bit fractious with his engineer and with Lewis, because Lewis was driving a little bit slower to save the tyres. Rosberg came over the radio and says he needs to speed up because I'm getting pushed into the Ferraris. If I go closer, I'll destroy my tyres. So obviously he was trying to manage his tyres. Lewis was trying to manage his. So it's a double-edged sword, really. Do you want me to manage my tyres or do you want me to speed up? Because I can't do both. And the Ferraris were just rubbing their hands at this point.
Yeah, it was more squabbling. This was the spark that lighted the fire that kicked off for the rest of the evening. But he came on the radio and said, "Yeah, get Lewis to speed up." And I think at the time Lewis was 2 seconds ahead of Rosberg, and Rosberg was 2 seconds ahead of Vettel. I mean, I don't know if you want to get into the whole thing now or you want to cover that later.
We'll cover the after-race squabble a little bit later on after the race.
Yeah.
But if we just go into the bit at the time, because the top four were very, very close and getting closer, and it was all to do with Lewis Hamilton having to preserve his tyres. But at that point, with Rosberg complaining, if he wants Hamilton to speed up or he wants to win the race, go get him.
Yeah, we saw that in practice that Mercedes weren't very happy on the softs, and Rosberg even said after qualifying yesterday, we won't be using the softs. Medium is much better. But obviously with the temperatures being different on race day and Ferrari put on the softs, they had to cover them, and obviously they can't run as long as Ferrari on the softs. So as you said, Hamilton had to slow down. But I said this to my dad at the time, and he said, "I'll take your point, but no." And what my point is Hamilton is probably backing off a little bit. One, to conserve his tyres, definitely, but to make him fall into this, fall into the path of Vettel, and then he's got to worry about Vettel then, and then Hamilton can storm off. And we did, over the course of the middle stint of the race, we did actually see that Hamilton back them all up and then go. And I think that's another thing is with Mercedes, and we'll probably cover it a bit later, is Hamilton had a load of time in the bag, so I don't think it was ever close between, at least Hamilton and Ferrari.
No, Hamilton I think had the covering of Ferrari all day, but Rosberg didn't. And my issue with it is, right, okay, I understand that you need to preserve your tyres, and that if you get into the turbulent air of Hamilton, you're going to ruin your tyres. But do you want to win the race or not? At the end of the day, do you want to win the race or not? And if you don't want to win the race, then suck it up and fight off Vettel. But obviously you do want to win the race, so go get him. If he's going too slow, because if it was the other way round, I'm pretty sure, I mean I can't be 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure if it was the other way round, because we've seen Lewis do this in the past, if the driver in front, teammate or anyone else, is going too slow, Hamilton will just go and get him and overtake him and go and win the race. By sitting behind Hamilton and complaining, it shows two things. One, that he's obviously he's not confident in tackling Hamilton. He doesn't think he can get him and overtake him. And two, that he's resigned the fact that he's not going to win the race. And the only way he can win the race is by pit strategy. Yeah,
and that's not how races are always won. It's won by actually overtaking someone, as you say. And I don't think Rosberg has got the courage, confidence, or the ability to overtake Hamilton. And it's just, as you said, you're going to get to a point that when you get to him, you are going to lose you're going to get a bit of turbulence, and you're going to lose a bit of grip because of that wake that Hamilton has. But you've got to overtake him somehow, and you'll have to go through that stage somehow. If you're fast enough, and you think you're fast enough, then go for it.
Indeed. Well, we'll cut back into this periodically, because there's a few laps where it sort of raises its head, and at the end of the race. We're going to lap. So staying on lap 20 quickly, Verstappen overtakes Sainz and just looks every bit the driver that he's Martin Brundle said he could be a world champion. He looks really good, and he's not afraid to overtake anyone. He was pulling some great overtaking manoeuvres again today. Yeah, it's like watching go-karting or like GP2. He just darts on the inside, and he's just really good at it. And the thing that they picked up in commentary, which I also, I
thought as well is when he darts in, he doesn't do it slow. He goes full speed, but he doesn't lock his tyres. He still manages to keep those tyres rolling, and he doesn't wear them at all, which is extremely impressive. I mean, he nearly didn't even, carry on in the race, because going back quickly to earlier in the race, around like lap 10, he took Ericsson in the same place in the hairpin at the end of the straight, and Ericsson, don't get me started on Ericsson, but Ericsson was just completely oblivious that he was there, and he cut him up. I mean, he just, maybe that was a bit, unexpected that Verstappen was that quick, that he didn't expect him, or he didn't even see him because he was that quick. But yeah, he's really, really good, and I'm really excited to see how he goes on through not only this season but seasons to come.
And I think, this is just a personal opinion, but it could be to do with the whole video game culture that he may have been brought up in, because he does seem to drive the car as if he is playing a Formula 1 game. Yes, obviously it's very different, but he's not afraid of putting his nose in places and getting in trouble. It's very interesting to watch him race.
Yeah, I wish I was that good at the Formula 1 game. Maybe he has been practicing using the Formula 1 game. I know he watches a lot of videos for his research and practice, but yeah, just really, really excited to see what he's capable of in the future.
Move on to lap 22, and this is another radio conversation that didn't come out over the television, but we've seen a few drivers who are complaining about too much radio communication, and then Fernando Alonso had a full-blown conversation about strategy with his engineer. They were talking for a good, must have been 30 seconds, saying what strategy they were going to go on to, what tyres they were going to have, and it was all at a calm pace. Now, I know, obviously, McLaren weren't at the front, and they weren't fighting for the win, and he wasn't necessarily in a fight. However, he must have still been taking corners at that time, and still travelling at a fair speed. And for him to have a full-blown conversation about strategy, about what Button's going to do and who he's going to beat, it was phenomenal to listen to, and it made me think, well, how come he can do it, but you guys can't?
I think the long straight at most is 13 to 15 seconds long for a Formula 1 car, so he would have done, just under half of the circuit talking if it was about 30 seconds long, but that proves how good a driver he is. I mean, he can take an awful car and make it look the best, and so it was probably no sweat for him. And we see it with Jensen as well. He talks, calm, cool, and calculated when he's on the radio. So it's kind of the same with him as well, I suppose.
Indeed, it's just phenomenal to listen to, and he is a supreme driver. So he is one of the best in the business, and that is why. Then we move on to lap 24, and I wrote, this is exactly what I wrote verbatim: Carlos Sainz retires with no gearbox. I then had to cross out the word retires. And then I put it underneath, then all of a sudden comes back to life.
You say that, I've got Saints retires lap 24, in brackets gearbox, and then I did the same as you. He managed to get it going somehow, and I had to scribble out retires, and then I just put at the end, issue.
Full system reboot, just turn it off and turn it on again, and it just came
worked
back to
perfectly
life.
Again after that. It was strange.
Yeah, I wonder. I'd be interested to see what they did there. But I did again. I heard him over the radio going. This didn't come out on television, but he was like, "Yeah, I've got an issue, gearbox issue." And he was like, "Okay, just bear with us 2 seconds." And he went, "Like, try it now." Yeah, no gear still. And then it came off, and then obviously they did something else, and it came back to life. But they're like IT technicians. It's like phoning
Well, maybe it is like the Formula 1 game.
It's like phoning.
You can't just reset it.
Yeah, it's just like phoning home support. I've got an issue. What do I do? Oh yeah, just turn it on, turn it off again. But so he came back, and then on lap 26, the top three were covered by 3.5 seconds. It was coming down all the time. Hamilton had backed Rosberg right back into Vettel's hands, and Hamilton was told to speed up, or they will give Rosberg priority in the next pit stop.
Yeah, it was. Again, we'll probably get to it more in depth later when we reveal some of the other things that happened. But I don't really understand it, to be honest. I don't see that they were under risk, Mercedes, from Ferrari. But again, I don't think Hamilton was too bothered if Rosberg pitted first or not, because Hamilton, as I mentioned previously, he knew he had a ton of pace left, that he could have just caught up Rosberg if necessary anyway. But Hamilton did, I think, speed up a bit, and he was told to hit 1:43.7 lap time, I think.
Yes, yeah.
And I think he was hitting late 43.6. So he did as he was told, and he was just doing his race anyway. I don't think he was, purposely. His main purpose was to hinder anyone. It just was a result of what he was trying to do and manage his own race.
Indeed.
And just
sorry.
That was it, really.
And it's interesting because he was managing his own race, and there has to be a certain amount of selfishness if you're going to be a Formula One driver, because you want to win. And yes, it's a team sport, but there comes a point where you put yourself in front of the team at times, and that's what he did today. And what's wrong with that? He wants to be world champion. We've seen Vettel do it in the past. I'm sure Rosberg would do the same, and arguably Rosberg did do the same in Monaco when he parked his car during qualifying that time and got a yellow flag, meaning Hamilton couldn't challenge his pole lap. So I think sometimes it suits to put yourself first, and sometimes it doesn't. But we'll get into that a little bit later, because it's fired up again, and it's getting juicy once more, that whole inter-team rivalry. On lap 30, Rosberg begins to complain of a front left problem with wearing, and Vettel boxes to attempt the undercut on Rosberg, but unfortunately for them, it didn't quite work.
No, again Mercedes covered them, and Rosberg did actually pit first. He came in a lap after Vettel on lap 31, and they all obviously had to bolt on the mediums because they hadn't run it yet. And Rosberg managed to stay ahead of Vettel when he came out of the pits. And Ferrari decided to split their strategy, because Kimi was fourth and not too far behind, but enough. They decided to keep him out, and he'd proven in practice that he could run for quite a while on the tyres. So he stays out to cover Hamilton to see, can they get any advantage there. And then Hamilton came in lap 33, and he came out, I think, with a 6-second lead in the end, and not far off Raikkonen, who was only just up the road, who hadn't pitted yet. But again, it was kind of just covering them, but it kind of came to nothing. All the pit stops, they all came out in the exact order they went in.
Indeed. So the undercut didn't work this time, so it looked like if there was going to be any overtaking, and Ferrari were going to have to challenge Mercedes on the track, and it was going to have to be an overtake manoeuvre. We got into lap 34, and this is a sort of a call out. If there are any budding artists out there, I've written a note here. I'd like to have a new comic written, and it would be called The Adventures of Pastor. Because his race today was really a race of two stories. At the start, he looked really good. He was overtaking people left, right, and centre. He looked like a Formula One driver, unlike him.
For the first time.
And then for the first time this season. And all of a sudden, it went wrong when he went into the pits, but got lost on the way in.
Well, you mentioned earlier about a tweet from Badger GP about radio chatter, and then I think they released another one about Pastor, which said, don't know if you've seen 12 men in black overalls, because my GPS seems to be on the blink. But the marshals behind the wall, which forms the pit lane, they had to quickly dart out of the way, and then because it suddenly cut to Maldonado reversing, and it wasn't like a consistent speed. He was, going back in short, quick bursts, and they were telling the marshals to get out of the way. But just really comical, and just weird.
It was the only thing that was missing was the Benny Hill music, and as he was jerking backwards, it was almost like, chase me, come on get me, come on.
Yeah.
And he was getting out of the way.
On the pit lane entrance, as you turn left to go on into the pit lane, there used to be a gravel pit there, which is what caught Lewis Hamilton out in his debut year, and which in the end did actually cost him the championship. They've removed that now, and they did it this weekend, and it's just a gravel. Just gravel, one idiot. It's just tarmac. So that would have caught Maldonado out.
It would have. And I love the fact that over the radio his engineer went, "Do we need a new wing?" No, it's fine. I've not caused any damage. I didn't hit anyone. And I'm going to go back to that later, because in 6 laps' time he has another adventure. But in between that, lap 35, Hamilton complains, which he had a few complaints over the weekend about this. His seat was getting hot, and not in a good way.
No, I think again, I don't know if you picked it up because you listened to the radio, but I think they were saying on the commentary that it was I don't think it actually was during the race. I think it was on like a Thursday when they interviewed him about all the comments he was making about hot steering wheel and hot seats, and he said it was like having a whooping.
Yeah, having a whooping.
Felt like having a whooping.
Yeah,
and they said, was that from his dad or his headmaster? And I think they also said in the commentary, noticed that we didn't say Nicole.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore.
But yeah, I mean, obviously that's going to be uncomfortable for you. And people were talking about radio chatter being distracting. It's got to be distracting when you're sat in a pretty hot seat. But then they did say that Hamilton said you don't notice it when you're winning, you only notice it when you're losing. But I'm pretty sure if I was sat in a seat that was getting hot, I'd notice it. I'm pretty sure I would.
Well, he does have fireproof overalls, so if bad comes to worse, he's all right, isn't he?
Well, I suppose, yeah. And then 5 laps later, the adventures of Maldonado take another turn as he has a huge sort of spin. They do a little bit of rallying. I think it was in qualifying yesterday where Martin Brundle said if you watch Maldonado, it's because he was doing sort of a rally sort of style corner. He said that's a lesson on how not to drive a Formula 1 car. We was given a few more lessons today. And then over the radio, and I'm going to say exactly how his engineer said it. Any damage, Pastor? Like a disappointed parent, he was asking, any damage? No, it's fine, I didn't hit anything.
I put in my notes, Maldonado quits race and enters drift competition. At least he won.
Yes.
But I do love the fact that you mentioned that his engineer he's resigned to just say any damage.
Any damage, Pastor? No, it's fine.
We've got a front wing waiting for you, Pastor.
It almost sounds like how our parents sounded when I started driving and I'd come home
Yes.
in the car. Did you hit anything today? No, actually, it went okay. It went okay today. I made it through without hitting anybody. But yeah,
Yes.
Keep an eye on Pastor Maldonado. And I think your prediction from early in the season of him having more accidents than points finishes,
it's not too bad, is it? I'm not normally good with those kind of things, but yeah, that one's not too shabby. I think he's. Well, we'll get to it later, but it's on 2-0 now, so I'm winning 2-0.
He's doing all right. And then Raikkonen came in lap 43, and his second connotation of this is my radio chatter of the day. Come on, get that McLaren out of the way.
Yeah, he said he didn't he? And ironically enough, that was Alonso, his teammate last year, so that must have been that must have tasted good. But I think on the next lap as well was it a force in? I can't remember who. There was 2 cars. And he came on again and said, "Come on, get these cars out of the way," as if McLaren Honda have a button on their pit wall. It's like wacky races where they can just open a door on the track and they just fall through or move them over. But he kind of said it in a way as well that he was smiling as he said it.
It's on lap 46, and this is my radio chat bit of the day. He says, "Come on, get these 2 cars out of the way," and he almost sounds like he's laughing at the end.
Laughing, yes, he says it, definitely, yeah.
A little bit of I hope he was, because that would be a brilliant side of Raikkonen that we don't see very often.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I've ever seen him laugh, apart from once when he did a feature for BBC F1. But yeah, radio chatter of the day. Come on, get these 2 cars out. Because he said, "Come on, get that McLaren out of the way," and then he said, "Come on, get these 2 cars out of the way." And he was doing it last week as well, or the week before in Malaysia, when he was like, "Come on, get these 2 cars to hurry up to get the safety car."
It's brilliant. He is a character.
He is indeed. Lap 44, I wrote about the Ricciardo and Ericsson fight, which was a really tasty fight. And actually, Ericsson held his own there.
He didn't do too bad, yeah. I mean, Ricciardo kind of shot himself in the foot because he got him at turn 4, or he got him by turn 3 into 4, but going into 4, he braked too late and too hard and locked up, and he just lost it, so he had to do it all again. But no, that was a good, clean fight. And it was good to see. Really exciting.
Indeed, it was. Lap 49, and nearly another huge accident. And Pastor Maldonado was involved again. But actually, I think this time he wasn't really to blame. Button and Maldonado had been having a good scrap. And I was actually thinking as it was going on, I wonder if drivers think, or especially Button in this situation, when they are fighting Maldonado, do they have in the back of their mind that it is Pastor Maldonado, and they know that he is a little bit prone to being a bit wild and causing accidents? But actually, in this case, really, it could have been Button's fault, and I think he has. I mean, I haven't been able to watch most of the the post-show, sorry, because I've had a few things going on here. But apparently, Button's picked up a few penalty points for this incident where he looked like he had the inside line going into turn 1. Then Maldonado came across, and Button was behind him, and Button went straight into the back of him, spinning Maldonado around and causing damage to the front of Button's McLaren.
Yeah, and this was another kind of race that was going on that for quite a while. It was like the Ericsson and Ricciardo race. They were overtaking each other all the time. They were just kept swapping positions. And I said to my dad at the time, I said, this is going to end in tears. And it did. But yeah, as you said, you mentioned about, do drivers have something in their head about when they approach Maldonado? Does that affect how they overtake him? And I actually think that it does. Not in this case, because Button did say afterwards he admitted that it was a misjudgment on his part, and the FIA did give him a time penalty after the race, and they've also given him 2 penalty points on his super license. But I think Button kind of held up his hand and said, "Yeah, my fault." But
yeah, and it was Mark Blundell was the steward today, and he's firm but fair, I think, Blundell.
Yeah.
And I think that is right, really, that he gets maybe not necessarily the time penalty, because it's not really going to affect him anyway, because he was down in 14th, but definitely the points on his licence, because again, that could have been another one like we saw with Webber and what was the guy's name in Valencia?
Heikki Kovalainen
in the Caterham, that's right. It could have very easily been an accident like that, going into a hard braking zone and coming over the top like that. But unfortunately for both of them, it wasn't both okay. But it meant that Maldonado had to retire. But there was a bizarre thing on lap 50 where Maldonado just drove through the pits first.
Yeah, he seemed to drive through. And I said to my dad, I said, maybe he's just, every lap now he's just going to drive through the pits. It's just as a safety thing, just not to get into any incidents.
And at least he found them this time.
Yes, at least he made it. Maybe that's why he was going so slow, so he would make it. It's like when you're going to somewhere you don't quite know, and you kind of have to take it slow so you can read the signs and things like that. I mean, that's what he was doing.
Or maybe he did get lost, and maybe he was trying to cross the line, but it took it a bit wide and was like, where am I now?
Yeah, but I think this is also why Button had to take a penalty in points and in time, because he did actually cost Maldonado finishing the race. I mean, Maldonado had already destroyed his race anyway with the drifting competition and the incident he got involved in, but he did cause them to have a brake problem, which is why he retired.
Indeed, and it was Maldonado. What do we do? What do we do? This is, I feel like a head teacher now. What are we going to do with Pastor Maldonado? What do we do with him?
It is strange. I mean, we see like Grosjean. He went through a stint where he was always crashing, but he came out of it. He's a really nice bloke to talk to. He's probably the nicest bloke to talk to in the paddock. It's just for some reason when he puts his helmet on, he's not Mr. Nice Guy anymore. He's just, I don't know, he just gets confused.
Yeah. And he did have a good point to the race where he was overtaking people, but it just Pastor.
And
anyway.
I think the last 3 seasons, he hasn't finished the first 2 races.
No. And it's got to be costing Lotus money. And points, obviously.
The money that he's bringing in.
Yeah,
so the money he's bringing in, they have to spend to fix his car. So it's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, lap 54, 2 laps before the end of the race, Max Verstappen, unfortunately, and I was gutted for him. 2 reasons: 1, because he'd driven a great race, and 2, because he's in my fantasy team. But Max Verstappen retires. It was actually a double-edged sword for me, fantasy-wise, because I'd picked one safety car, and looky here.
I actually cried a little when I saw because he's in my fantasy team and I predicted no safety cars, so I was 2 laps away from having a decent prediction there. And my girlfriend was sat with me and she predicted 1 safety car, so she rubbed it in a bit. I mean, I've written here safety car and then no for quite a lot of those.
Yeah.
It was just gutting and say Verstappen was in my team, and I've got the Sauber car as well, and Saints had a problem and didn't finish in the points, so a bad day for me, fantasy-wise.
And the car, I don't know whether you heard it, but the car, when it came to a stop, my word, it sounded horrific. It sounded like all sorts of things were grinding and exploding in the back there. It was a horrific noise, absolutely horrific.
Sound like a bag of spanners.
It did, yeah, it did indeed. It sounded like a broken pinball machine. It was awful.
Not that I carry around a bag of spanners, but if you were to have a bag of spanners, that's what I imagine it sounded like.
Yeah, that's what it was. A bag of spanners with one cat in it
Yes.
is what it sounded like. And then he came over the radio and he just sounded so gutted, and I think he would be, because he'd driven such a superb race, and it was horrible to see him go, but another engine failure for Renault.
Yeah, so this is the only reason why I'm, thought it might be a bad idea to choose Toro Rosso in my fantasy team, is because they've got the problems with the Renault power unit, and we've seen that both Red Bulls have now used 2 each, and this is Verstappen's second as well, so he's now got to use a third one. Sainz has had better luck, but it's sad because Verstappen was on for an 8th place finish, which is another points finish for him. So that's quite disappointing, really.
And in a way, it was a shame it didn't come 4 laps or so earlier, because the safety car neutralised the race, and we didn't get to see any sort of climax between Ferrari and and Rosberg. Meaning Hamilton wins, and Rosberg finishes second with Vettel in third. A good race, not the drama that we saw in Malaysia, but plenty of drama after the race, Ben.
Yes,
we'll get into that in a
plenty.
minute. I'm just going to do a rundown of how it finished, and then we'll get into the drama that took place afterwards. Actually, before that, we need to get into the calamity that was the Chinese marshals trying to get that Toro Rosso through the gate. James Allen tweeted a great picture of the scene in Austin Powers where he's trying to do the 28-point turn through the corridor. I've never seen anything so hilarious
Yes.
on an F1 track before, and even the fans and the crowd were getting involved. They just couldn't understand why it wasn't going through, and their way of trying to get it through, we'll open the gate really wide and we'll just keep yamming it. It'll go through eventually. And the Toro Rosso guys had to come running across.
So they tried to get it moving, and obviously it was jammed in gear, and for some reason they couldn't press. I think it took about 3 of them to press the neutral button so they can actually move the car, and then they started pushing it too fast, and then crashing into the wall. I don't know. Have you seen the film Despicable Me, the first one?
Yes, yeah.
When Gru is returning home and he parks outside his house, and he just crashes into the car in front, crashes into the car behind, and does that a few times, and then just parks outside his friend's house. That's what it's like. And as you said, the Toro Rosso engineers had to come along again and actually remove the front wing to allow them to move through the wall. It's just hysterical. If you didn't watch the race because you didn't have Sky Sports, you didn't have the time, definitely on YouTube or find somewhere definitely watch that moment, because it's just hilarious.
It's ridiculous. And like in the commentary they said, not only is Verstappen a good driver, but he's smart and considerate as well, because he's parked it by a gate, and you think, oh, they'll get rid of the car really quickly. It took them an age to get to the car and actually start doing anything with it anyway, and then when they did get there, they nearly destroyed the Toro Rosso by trying to yam it through the fence. Absolute calamity. And as you said earlier with the whole Hulkenberg thing, it took them ages to get anywhere near the cars. Ridiculous, but hilarious. And if you do get a chance to watch it, do so.
The main coping method of the marshals seemed to be, if you can't move it or there's no one around, just wave your flag at it. I mean, especially with Verstappen and Hulkenberg, who had smoke coming out of the car, they just seem to wave their flag at it to try and disperse it. And it's just,
maybe it's like a magic trick. If they drape the flag over the top, it would just disappear.
I mean,
but anyway,
if it had been in Europe, the car would have been off the track before the driver even had a chance to get out. So.
Yeah. Ridiculous. But anyway, the race was finished under the safety car, and the final classifications were 16 cars finishing. Hamilton wins. Rosberg comes second, with Vettel and Raikkonen third and fourth, Massa and Bottas fifth and sixth. So we had a Mercedes double, Ferrari double, and then a Williams double to take up the top 6. Then Grosjean gets the first points for Lotus in 7th. Felipe Nasser picking up his second points finish of the year in 8th, with Ricciardo 9th, and Ericsson getting more points for Sauber in 10th place. Perez finishing 11th, with Alonso 12th, Button 13th, and he's going to suffer a time penalty. I don't know whether that took him behind Sainz, though, in 14th. I'm not sure whether his time penalty does that. I've not actually seen the final classification after that time penalty. Stevens and Merry finishing off in 15th and 16th. Good to see both Marussias finishing, and both McLarens.
Yes, that's what they needed. Again, I think McLaren stepped up their engine for the weekend, and they gained about a second. I think Button said, but that's the data they need. I mean, they didn't have a great race because obviously Button had his incident, and they finished behind. But every bit of mileage helps. And I think Alonso did more this weekend than he did over Malaysia, Australia, and winter testing combined. So they'll get there, and they were close to getting into Q2 in qualifying. So give it the European season. So give it to the European season, which I think is what you've predicted.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
they'll get points. I don't think they'll get points, but they'll be fighting for points probably.
Yeah.
And off the like 11th, 12th place.
Indeed. And one of my other predictions, I'm 1 point away, with Sauber now sitting nicely on 19 points, Ben. I predicted 20 plus, so within 3 races, I've nearly got my prediction spot on. But then, if you read all the other predictions, they're terrible.
Yes, but it wasn't your prediction. I'm just having a quick look. Your prediction was for the whole season, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to outscore that by quite a bit.
Yeah.
So it's just just a few races too short for that one, I think.
Maybe I was a bit conservative.
Yes.
Who knows? But we shall see. So that's the final classification as the race finished. I said I haven't checked with where Button finishes now with his time penalty.
Sorry, just also I think Merry is going to get given a penalty as well for speeding under the safety car.
Ah, right. Okay, yeah, I did hear there was another driver. So Merry is that 2 points or 3 points on his license?
I'm not sure yet. They didn't say.
Well, if it's anything, Maldonado did it last time and he got 3 points. So I'd imagine Merry will get 3 points.
It will be something like that. I would have thought, yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into then, Ben, the afters between Rosberg and Hamilton that started in the press conference. The relationship last year was fractious. Race 3, Hamilton's ahead of Rosberg in the World Championship. Vettel's ahead of Rosberg in the World Championship. Rosberg is not liking it at all.
No, he's got given a lot of arguments, but they don't seem to carry any weight. They seem a bit pointless. I mean, in the driver's press conference after the race, Hamilton said that he really enjoyed the race, and he had to slow down a bit because of his tyres, and they zoomed out of Hamilton's face and they looked at the whole 3, and Rosberg's face, it just looks like a 2-year-old who couldn't get his way. His face, it was just grumpy as anything, and he said, it's surprising to hear that from Lewis, that he's being so selfish. You just think, hang on, he's a Formula 1 driver like you are. You're not thinking, if you were in the lead, Rosberg, you're thinking, well, hang on, what about Hamilton? He might want to win. I'll think about him for a change.
Yeah.
And he didn't hold you up, and he didn't put you into threat from Ferrari, because Vettel even said in the press conference, I couldn't have I couldn't have caught Rosberg if I tried. We didn't have that pace. And if Hamilton, or in my opinion, Hamilton is a lot faster than Rosberg, he was able to storm away, especially towards the end of the race. Surely Rosberg had at least half of that he could have used before. I mean, I know you had the problems with the tyres, but just come on, just race, just drive. If you want to win the championship and you want to be good, you can't rely on the team moving out of the way for you. You've got to do it yourself.
And I couldn't believe it when he said, he's obviously not thinking about the team, he's just thinking about himself. Well, as I said earlier, you have to be selfish to be a Formula 1 driver. It's a team sport, but it's not like football where the team wins together and loses together and all this sort of thing. There's a Constructors' Championship. You've got to win to win the World Championship. And for him to sit behind Hamilton and complain that he's going too slow, well, if he's going too slow, go and overtake him. And I think a lot of the journalists who are going to be asking him questions after this race are going to be saying, all right, well, he was going too slow. Okay, and we understand the argument about turbulence in the tyres, but if he's going too slow, you're in the same car, go and get him. Go and overtake him. Because no one's going to stop you from doing that. Mercedes weren't going to stop him from doing that because they want their drivers to fight, and as long as they bring both cars home, they're not going to be fussed. So I don't get this whole, it's not very good for the team. Well, you finished first and second, so it is good for the team. The only person it's not good for, Rosberg, is you.
And if that's too difficult for him, out-qualify him on a Saturday.
Yeah,
he proved
absolutely.
that last year. He out-qualified Hamilton hands down. He was much better on a Saturday. This year, but Hamilton has just stepped it up another level and is better in every aspect. It's just out-qualify him. Then you can drive away. But then Hamilton will probably overtake him anyway, and then he'd say, "Oh, I had to slow down because of my tyres." Hamilton's not thinking about the team. He's gone off and won it. Well, shut up.
Yeah, I think coming from a non-bias angle, sorry, from a neutral perspective, Rosberg is suffering massively and can't see past Lewis Hamilton at the minute. Hamilton is in Rosberg's head, and with it only being 3 races in, that is a ridiculous thing to have happened, because the title is still very close and Rosberg can still make inroads into Hamilton's lead, but he's defeated himself before he started. So for me, looking at it now from the outside, it's looking more likely that Vettel will finish runner-up in the series than Rosberg will.
Yeah, I mean, Rosberg was also complimenting Hamilton at the beginning of the season, saying, "Oh, you know, Hummus. Hamilton drove like a world champion. You know, he did a great race, and he is a world champion, and he deserves to win." Well, you saying that comment is going to help Hamilton. He's going to feed off that, and he's just going to, consume it all and be better. I mean, in the press conference, which I was actually laughing at when Rosberg was making all his comments about Lewis and saying, that he was, pretty much that Hamilton was quicker than him and Rosberg couldn't do anything about it. That was the basics of what he was saying. Hamilton was smirking like anything. So was Vettel as well. And when Hamilton was asked to comment, he laughed and said, What can I say? My job is to win the race. My job isn't to think about Nico's race. My job is to think about my race." And that just summed it all up.
Yeah, I think I don't know whether it's something in a contract or something when he signed it. But I don't know whether Rosberg is supposed to be getting preferential treatment or whatever. I wouldn't see that be in the contract. Obviously, he's a German driver driving for a German team, so whether he expects to be treated more favourably, I don't know. But I think he's going to get a speaking to. And they've got Niki Lauda on board there at Mercedes, and I'm pretty sure he's going to be grabbing Nico by the scruff of the neck and going, "You're a Formula 1 driver. You want to win the World Championship. Go and win it. We are not going to give it to you. You have to go and earn it." No one has ever been given the Formula 1 World Championship. It's never just been given to you. You have to earn it in every race. And yes, you're racing for the team, and we want both cars to come home. But if you want that Drivers' World Championship, you've got to go and get it. And Lewis Hamilton is the man in your way, so he's the man you've got to go and beat. And we're not going to just let him slow down so you can overtake. You've got to go and do it on track.
Absolutely. I think we've covered it all really, and just sound a bit like a gospel now. I'm going to say, raise my hands in the air, say
hallelujah
after everything you say now.
Right, so covered that bench. Do you want to break down then the current standings in the Drivers' World Championship? It's looking good there for Hamilton anyway.
For the drivers, Hamilton has he's gained the lead because it was 3 points before. It is now, let me do some quick math. It is now 13-point difference. So Hamilton's now on 68. Vettel is still second with 55. Rosberg is a close third with 51. And then I'll just go through the drivers now rather than the points, because it's kind of spaced out after that. We've got Massa in fourth, with Raikkonen in fifth, catching Massa now, and you would expect to overtake him soon. Bottas in sixth, Nasser in seventh, Ricciardo 8th, Grosjean 9th, Verstappen 10th, Hulkenberg 11th, Carlos Sainz 12th, Ericsson 13th, Kvyat 14th, and Sergio Perez in 15th. And they're the only point scorers at the moment. And then you've got the 2 McLarens, the 2 Marussias, and believe it or not, you've got Pastor Maldonado in 20th.
Oh dear, poor Pastor. Right, well, I'll go through the Constructors' Championship then. Mercedes sitting pretty at the top with 119 points, with Scuderia Ferrari behind, just 40 points behind now on 79 points. Williams finishing in third at the minute with 71 points behind in 48 points. Sauber fourth, they're looking good, 19 points, 100 points behind Mercedes, but only 1 point off my prediction for the whole season, so they're doing really, really well with that Ferrari engine. Then you've got Red Bull and Toro Rosso in 6th, Force India in 7th, Lotus in 8th, McLaren sitting back in 9th with Mana Marussia both on 0 points. So McLaren got a lot of catching up to do. They're 119 points behind, so I don't think they'll be winning any World Championships anytime soon. No, absolutely not. So Ben, just a few quick questions then, a few takeaways. Let's round up this race then. Who do you think is going to be most disappointed coming away from this race?
Verstappen.
Verstappen. Elaborate. That's a good point.
He drove a great race. He was going to finish in the points, only 8th, which may think, it's only 8th, but still good points for Toro Rosso. And instead, he had an absolutely beautiful race. And
a beautiful
through
race.
no fault of his own, it was taken away from him. 2 laps left.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think for me, the most disappointed people coming away from this race will be Martini and any sponsors for the Williams cars.
That's a very good one as well. They had a very boring and quiet race.
They finished 5th and 6th, and I think they got even less TV time other than the Marussias than anybody else. They're hardly on the TV. Obviously, they got good points today, but yeah, I'm pretty sure Martini will be sitting there going, "Where's our car? Where's our branding? What is going on here?" So yeah, I think they'll be very disappointed. Driver of the day then, Ben. I take it from your gleaming sort of rapport there with Verstappen. It's going to be Verstappen?
No.
Oh,
it's
okay.
going to be Lewis Hamilton.
Okay.
And yeah, he started first and finished first, but he was so quick, and he seemed to really enjoy that race. And he could have just done anything. He controlled that race. He didn't drive flat out. He controlled it, and he dictated everything that happened.
Mine is Pastor Maldonado.
Yeah.
No,
followed by Ericsson.
Yeah, of course not. No. I'm going to say Verstappen. I think he drove supremely yet again in this race and showed such great maturity, and he's definitely one for the future. I mean, I don't want to get too high on him right now because obviously you can get too high too soon and fall from grace fairly quickly. But yeah, I think he drove supremely today. So, what do you take away from this Grand Prix bench? What we've got to look out for going into Bahrain?
Looking into Bahrain is what's going to develop through the week between Rosberg and Hamilton. What will Rosberg do to try and get back at Hamilton in Bahrain? Could we see another Monaco kind of thing that he did last year? And because it's much hotter, or saying that, I think it's a night race in Bahrain, but it still could be quite hot, the track temperatures. So I think Ferrari will be a lot faster in Bahrain. So I expect Ferrari to challenge Rosberg. Not Hamilton.
That would be brilliant. That would be excellent. So that's to look forward to Bahrain. For me, I'm going to be writing a piece up about what to look forward to, really. And it's going to go into the sensitivity of Formula 1 and Formula 1 drivers, both cars, radio communications, the whole shebang. So look out for that on fivelightspodcast.com. So I'll tantalise you and tease you with that bit. So Ben, let's go through our predictions then. Who did you have in your team again for Badger GP?
My cars were Mercedes, Ferrari and Toro Rosso, so obviously top 4 cars I have. Toro Rosso didn't finish, they didn't finish in the points. And then I had Nasser, who finished in the points. He got me 4 points. And then I had Verstappen, who obviously had his failure. And then I had obviously Lewis Hamilton as well, who won.
Wow, so that's good. Ben, I had Mercedes, Ferrari and Williams, so I had those top 6 right in there, the top 6. I also had Massa, who finished 5th, so I'm happy with that. Had Verstappen, who obviously didn't finish, but then I had Sainz as well. I had Nasser as well, who picked me up some points, so I'm feeling pretty good. Prediction-wise, Ben.
Pretty good from you. Prediction-wise, for pole was Lewis Hamilton, which I got.
Same here, yep.
For winner, I had Lewis Hamilton, which I got.
Same.
I did have, if you remember from the previous podcast, I said it was going to be Vettel Rosberg. I changed that Friday night. I changed that to Kimi Räikkönen Vettel.
After lambasting me on the previous podcast about making
you'd done
changes.
it, so I thought I can do it.
You...
And it didn't turn out to be that good, although it turned out better because I had Vettel in 3rd. So I got Vettel in 3rd. Fastest lap I chose Kimi Räikkönen, and it wasn't. And then I had safety cars 0, and that failed on the last 2 laps. So I'm pretty fed up, to be honest.
Good. I had Vettel second, Raikkonen third, so I didn't get anything for those ones. I had 1 safety car, which came true in the end, which was good. And who did get the fastest lap then, Ben?
Lewis Hamilton.
And I had Lewis Hamilton fastest lap. We've also entered the team in the ultimate, I can't remember, UD?
Yes.
Something like that, the UD, yeah. I'll try and find that out. While I'm trying to do that, Ben, just sort of give Badger GP a little plug for me. Go on.
Yes, head over to, they've got an app, Badger GP. So it must have Formula 1. It gives you your news, as well as obviously there's the fantasy on top of that. They do little anecdotes, and they tweet a lot of things about the Race Journey Race, like we mentioned during this podcast. They're quite amusing. 2 really great guys, and yeah, if you're into fantasy, or if you're not into fantasy and you're just into F1, I definitely recommend the fantasy, because it adds another dimension to the racing. I mean, my girlfriend, she isn't into fantasy sports, but she signed up in our league, and she just got all the predictions right this weekend. So she's been rubbing that in for a while, and she's doing better than me now. So there you go.
Indeed. We'll give you the Badger GP League and the code in a minute if you want to join. It's not too late. It's not too late to join. You can still join and still have a lot of fun. And if you go pro, there's still prizes to be won. So if you go and join up and sign up for pro, you can win prizes every week with the Fantasy F1. So we joined the Ultimate Dream Teams League, which was a gauntlet thrown down to us by the guys over at the Flat Out Fever podcast, who've also invited us to be on their show, and we accept that invite. We would love that. But only if it's reciprocal. So we'll go on yours and you come on ours, because we'd love to have a little bit of a chat about Formula 1 with you guys, because we do love listening to your podcast as well. And that invite is extended to any other Formula 1 podcasts. If you want to come on our show, or if you're a F1 writer and you want to come on our show, please, by all means, send us an email at 5lightspodcast.com, and we can certainly do that, and we'll go on your show if you'd like us to as well. Our Ultimate Dream Team then, Benj, our team was, because it's different to Badger GP, so it's a different format. You pick 2 teams and you pick 6 drivers, and you have so many points. I can't remember the points limit now. But our 2 teams were Mercedes and Ferrari, so we've done very well there, first 4 cars. We had Carlos Sainz Jr., who finished, which was good. We had Lewis Hamilton, who won the race. We had Felipe Nasser, got points, very good. We had Max Verstappen and Nico Hulkenberg there, who both didn't finish, but Max Verstappen was looking good there for a while. But yes. I think we've got a good team there. I think we're going to be challenging those guys. And Lewis Hamilton was our team captain there, and he got double points. So
yes, we need to prove that we're better than the Flat Out Fever podcast. We need to, because the Flat Out Fever Dan, he's winning at the moment, or at least he was before the weekend. So we need to chase him and stay on top.
We shall find out at 2:00 today if he is still top of our league and still top of their league. So hopefully we will topple FOF Dan, and we can take the reins there and take charge. But if you listen to this podcast and you've got no other Formula 1 podcast to listen to and you're a bit of a loss, then head over to Flat Out Fever. Head over to our website at fivelightspodcast.com, and you'll be able to download the Flat Out Fever podcast from their website, which is linked from ours, and also the On The Limit podcast. And if there's any other F1 podcasts out there, as I said, let us know. We'll happily put links on our website to yours if you do the same for us, because we want to share the sport of F1. We're not here to be selfish and say that we're the only F1 podcast, because that's simply not true. There are loads of great F1 podcasts out there. So let's share the love, and let's start working together and bring Formula 1 to more people. What do you say, Ben?
Absolutely. It's a team sport. We're not Renault, and we're not Red Bull. We're more McLaren Honda at the moment.
We are more McLaren Honda at the minute, absolutely. So Ben, anything finally just to take away, or is that it for us for the Chinese Grand Prix?
I think we've covered everything really. I'm glad it's only a week gap until Bahrain.
Indeed.
We saw a really good race there last year, so fingers crossed again for this year.
Absolutely, and we will be back on Thursday, ready for Friday podcast. Ben, breaking down Bahrain. You looking forward to it?
Absolutely, great circuit.
Cool, it's going to be a good race, and the season has added a further bit of spice now with Lewis Hamilton and Rosberg both at each other's throats. So it's another dimension to this great season. It's going to keep going on this one. And Ferrari, as you said, with a hotter circuit, they're going to start coming back at Mercedes.
Yes, just can Mercedes or can Rosberg do anything to stop them, and Hamilton do anything to stop them? and it's going to go right down to the wire, these two. But hopefully Williams can join in as well at some point.
Absolutely. So, this podcast is going to go live in a moment, obviously, and it'll be available on iTunes, where we'd like you to subscribe and leave some comments and some stars so we can see how we're doing. And if you've got any suggestions, please feel free to do so. It will also be available on SoundCloud. It will be available on Stitcher, podcastdirectory.com. All the links are on our website, fivelightspodcast.com. Head over there and you can download this podcast on so many different formats. We're also on YouTube, so head over to the YouTube channel, and we'll be looking to do some more videos in the upcoming future. So head over there for that sort of stuff. You can follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter as well, at Five Lights Pod, and we also have an Instagram feed at Five Lights Pod as well. Ben also posted his first picture on the Instagram feed this week, which is a lovely picture of your notebook.
Yeah, I thought, well, Ted Kravitz at Sky Sports has his, so why can't I have mine?
Absolutely, absolutely. And what a wonderful little notebook it is, and it'll be filled with notes for Bahrain, I'm sure, for our upcoming podcast. So that's it from us. Hope you enjoyed the race, hope you enjoyed the podcast, and stay tuned for the next podcast on Friday. Ben, anything else to say?
Well, there are no more early nights, so yeah, just crack on with work, and then Bahrain will be here soon. And have a good week.
Have a good week indeed. We will see you on Friday. The 5 lights have gone out. Thanks for listening.